Hello, I'm Russ Milheim from the Direct. Thank you for talking to me today about Acolyte.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I have seen, obviously, the first four episodes, and it's great. I've really enjoyed it. So great work on crafting this new Star Wars tale.
Thank you.
Now, it obviously takes place in the High Republic era, and this is the first time that time period has been explored on screen in live action. What were some of those guiding principles in terms of, camera work, cinematography that the team, stuck to make sure it had its own unique place within the Star Wars pantheon?
Yeah, I mean it's a real challenge to step into something with such a pedigree and history where, it's you want to kind of honor all the amazing work that's been made up until this point, but also recognize that this is its own show. It's its own and deserves its own style. But I think what we were trying to do is do something that both kind of harken back to the original three films that felt a little bit more kind of handmade and had a little bit more texture and density and kind of grit to it. But then also added this very new component of this martial arts component, which introduced a new kind of style of visual storytelling, which was really exciting. But I felt we always felt like even though it's sort of a different genre, the two work together beautifully. In terms of Star Wars, we always felt like George Lucas had a kind of a less is more ethos, really striving towards simplicity in the visual storytelling and really just, moving the camera when it really meant something. And in fact, in the way of doing that, the result of doing that would mean that, our visuals would have more of an impact rather than being just an overwhelming flood of imagery. And it was a similar approach to the martial arts component where, we're very influenced by wuxia films like Come Drink with Me and Lady Snowblood and later films like Kill Bill and Crouching Tiger, where I mean, the camera work is exceptional, but it never overshadows the incredible fight choreography of these films. And so we were there to use the camera to really highlight the fight choreography. And so to try to make sure when the camera travels through frame, it's traveling in relationship to the performers. And when it pushes in or it moves, it's in key moments or, really taking advantage of those moments of stillness. A great action scene has these moments of intensity punctuated by these great moments of stillness, and that we felt like was very important. So, as we started to kind of put all those things together in our sort of visual guide that we were creating for the show, it felt like an easy kind of combination. Like those two elements kind of really resonated together in a way that I thought was nice. And I feel like the opening sequence, the opening fight sequence with Indara and May, it encapsulates so much of it. It has the martial arts component, but it has an iconic kind of Star Wars location. It has a look to me. I was very much inspired by Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid to create something that felt like almost like a Western. A stranger walks into town and a battle erupts. It's really fun to do all those components and then still have those awesome like Star Wars elements like the creatures and the droids and the pill-shaped lights and everything it all for some reason just felt like it all fit together really well.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of the High Republic books, so I just wanted to, make sure I asked, were you familiar with any of those going in, or?
I mean, I have to admit, I thought I was a big fan, but I have met so many people who are so much bigger fans than I am. And uh, I feel a bit ashamed, but I mean, Leslie is an encyclopedia of Star Wars info. And I was like, constantly impressed by the knowledge that she would bring to the table. So, I mean, I feel like she could speak to that more than I could for sure.
How did your work on shows like Russian Doll and Only Murders in the Building kind of affect how you approach this series, which is very different from those two?
Yeah, I mean, well, it is. And that was initially daunting, but I think the thing that I tried to kind of keep clear in my head as I was moving forward is every story is about relationships. It's about how people connect or fail to connect. It's about people overcoming obstacles and reckoning with things inside themselves. And that's true whether it's a mystery comedy or whether it's something like Star Wars. And so if you're true to the heart of the dramatic components of the scenes, then all your creative decision making will start to kind of fall into place. And so on that level, it feels there's a familiarity to visual storytelling, whether it's on this enormous scale or whether it's something smaller. Now, on Star Wars, there are all these other added components, and I felt like there was, for me, a lot to learn very quickly to kind of get up to speed to how to work with these massive craft departments that work in a way and on a scale that I'm just haven't dealt with before. And I'm talking about, special effects and the kind of phenomenal rigs that they would build and the practical effects that they would create, whether it was fire or snow or smoke or all these things, or it's the creature effects and how photography impacts them and how to light and work with them to make them look as good as they possibly can. And so for that side of it was just so much fun for me. It was such a big sandbox to be able to kind of play around in and get to know better.
Compared to traditional Star Wars, approaching how this was going to look on screen, did you guys kind of pick out any elements from previous entries that you're like, whether that be visual styles or quirks that you wanted to specifically avoid to distance yourself a little bit from those things? Because I know that there are similarities because it is Star Wars, but
I mean, it was more, it was less about trying to avoid things and more about what we were trying to lean into, and I look at the film texture of the early films, and they do really have a sort of a granularity to them from the film grain that I love so much, and I wanted to bring into the show is only to the degree that it would not feel like it was something kind of retro or throwback, but something that felt just a little softer and a little bit grittier. And I even looked at some of the there's a whole community of people who find film prints from the original three films and scan them and present them without noise reduction. And so you get a little bit of a feel of what it might have been like to watch, A New Hope in a theater in 1977 or something, and how it had a different like special kind of magic then. And I don't know, I really I love that stuff. I love that kind of more handmade aesthetic.
yeah, uh, you know, one thing that Acolyte really does excel at is the introduction of new alien species, such as everyone's favorite new tracker in episode 4. What was it like filming with all of those unique creatures and, the challenges that come with everything involved there?
Yeah, I mean, there's this whole conceptualization process, right? Creating a creature like that, and how much of it is going to be practical, how much of it is going to be a digital effect. And, we always tended to go in the direction of trying to do something practical. So we had, Basil is I mean, I think almost entirely on screen as a performer in a creature costume. And so, that does make things easier in some ways because you have a real, person to photograph. What I witnessed is the incredible challenges that these performers go through, being able to kind of perform and move in these like incredible costumes, because trying to kind of being able to see where you're going and being able to move in a way that feels realistic. I mean, I was really impressed by the amount of work and the kind of team effort that went to kind of rehearsing and guiding these our performers to kind of get the movements and the behaviors down in a way that felt real, and really fun to watch.
Do you have any particular favorite creations or any that maybe didn't make the final cut that you're like, oh, that was so neat. I wish it got into the final product.
I've always loved Pip from the beginning. I mean, I remember I had like the hair stood up on the back of my neck in that first meeting where I saw the first drawings of Pip, and I thought, wow, this is going to be really, really special. I also think of the bartender in the opening scene. I mean, every time I see that shot of the bartender and you tilt down and you see his little kid grabbing his leg, I mean, it always chokes me up a little bit. It's just so adorable and so kind of heartbreaking. And I'm overwhelmed by how Neil Scanlon and his team were able to create that stuff and make it feel so emotive. It's really phenomenal. It's really special.
You also got the honor of introducing the terrifying Sith in a badass way at the end of episode 4. Can you talk about crafting that entrance and building the terror necessary to make him feel like this real threat that they've never seen before?
Yeah, I mean that introduction was one of the things that we probably had the most number of conversations about how to do this and how to make it look right and how to when you are really threading a needle where you want to do something that has the appropriate level of gravitas, but without feeling overly kind of magical or like without sort of nodding to some other creature, or some other thing that you've seen before in a film. And it's that there's so much out there, that people will potentially associate it with other characters. And so it was extremely difficult. And we played around with a lot of ideas. And, one of the things we ended up playing around with, which I thought was very successful, is shooting some of the motion backwards, basically having the performer move backwards and then reversing the footage in post so that the movements just have a little bit of an unnatural feeling to them. And it's a very subtle effect, when he kind of floats down to the ground during his intro. We shot that both ways. We shot it actually in forward motion with him floating down, and also with him kind of gliding backwards and then reversing the footage. And it's subtle, but it does create a little bit of that kind of uncanny effect. And that was a word we used a lot. It's like how do you get that feeling of like this looks real but doesn't quite feel right to me, and because of that it's unsettling. I mean, that was kind of the target for us.
Now, after that, I'm going to have to assume that you now had to orchestrate, and help film one of the biggest live action sequences with the most Jedi in the Star Wars universe yet. And so what was it like orchestrating that and making that all work seamlessly and come together?
Oh God, well, wait till you see episode 5. I mean, it is it's
I'm
just
excited. I'm excited.
it is the most. It's just nonstop action, which is, action is incredibly challenging to photograph and execute. There are so many shots involved. There's so much specific choreography involved, and so it takes an incredible amount of planning and coordination across departments. And the other thing too, when you're creating that much action in one short span of time, there's a real concern that you're going to exhaust your audience. And so it became very important that each action sequence had its own rhythm, and that each character kind of had their own style, and that each fight had its own sense of stakes and its own power dynamics. And I think that really comes across in episode 5 in a way that it really the tension kind of ramps up beautifully, and it just feels like this onslaught in this really intense way. And it's even though we're a Star Wars show, we're not, a big blockbuster feature film, so we don't quite have the time and resources that might come along with having a bigger budget feature film. So there is an expediency and an efficiency that you need to kind of approach these things with, and that means just really incredible planning and coordination across all departments, and really getting on board with the action designer Chris Cowan and stunt coordinator, and figuring out the best methods of execution and understanding how much of this is going to be second unit, how much of it's going to be main unit, and yeah, and at the same time, how are we going to photograph this in a way that really shows it in the most dynamic, exciting way possible, and highlights the incredible like fight choreography of all these performers.
Yeah. Now, a certain sect of people online have decided to go and, review sites and lower the audience score of the show. And it's like with, Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 14% audience approval and 3.5 out of 10 stars on IMDb, which obviously isn't reflective of the show's quality. And it's, it can feel very unfortunate that this immense amount of, work and effort might get overlooked by some audience because of that. But from your end, as an integral, player in the show's production, what are your thoughts on how audiences have reacted to the show on both ends of the spectrum?
I mean, I just my favorite audience member is my son. I brought him to the screening, the New York City screening of it, and he got to see it in a theater. And uh, obviously he's a little biased, but I just loved hearing the way he kind of interacted with the show, and he just had great questions and was really engaged. I mean, I could tell by the questions he was asking or things he was anticipating in the new episodes that he really locked into the story. And I think that's one of the things I love about Star Wars when it works well. It can really work for a lot of audiences, and to have a show that you can watch with your kids and both really enjoy and be able to talk about afterwards, I think it's just like a magical thing.
So what are the odds that you're already gearing up and ready to go to shoot season two?
I hope to be. We're it feels like there's a lot of positive energy behind season one. So I guess we're gonna see what happens. But I had the time of my life working on season one. I mean, I love working with Leslie, and I was at just a top-notch crew. And just moments where I was walking through set and I look over and there's a Wookiee standing over there, getting their costume ready. And I just had to pinch myself and say, I just can't believe I'm here right now. So yeah, it was an incredible ride.
I mean, I'm crossing my fingers for any High Republic stuff. The more, the better.
Cool.
I have two more questions for you. I want to jump back to Pip, which you obviously know you loved. And from the sounds of it, there was a fully practical Pip that you guys used a lot because I wanted to ask, how much of his droiding, as it were, was legitimately, in the camera compared to practical effects. Oh, I'm sorry, compared to visual effects.
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of it was in camera, and there were sort of multiple pips that had different abilities. So for certain shots, you'd use one pip or the other. And then, when it came to some of the special tools, that's where VFX came in and added those things, whether it was like picking a lock or, doing a little like electricity zap or something like that. So it felt like we have some phenomenal VFX in the show, and I wouldn't, I know there's certainly a trend these days to talk about it, doing everything practically and in camera, and I love that, and I think that's very important. But certainly for this show, it was all about doing that in the spirit of giving visual effects as many elements and real textures and real things to kind of work with for them to kind of create their magic, which I think always ends up in a better result, basically, and feels more integrated into the environment that we've already photographed.
On a similar note, I wanted to ask about the locations that you guys used. I remember going into the show, ahead of time, there was a lot of talk about how there was a lot of practical locations, especially compared to a lot of recent shows, whether it just be Star Wars or whatever, love to utilize the volume. And so there's a lot of, VFX backgrounds, whereas, for this, there's a lot less of that. Can you kind of talk about, filming at those locations and when you guys chose were the right moments to, maybe build a practical set on stage or a VFX screen to get something that you needed?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those decisions come down to how big the set needs to be and how much screen time it's going to get. If we're going to be spending a whole episode, with the 4 and 5 for the most part, we're in this incredible magical forest, and Dagobah was a big influence on the look of that, and that meant it should be built, and we figured it. We found a ginormous warehouse in the Arborfield stages in the UK, and we filled it up very quickly with an array of real life plants and gigantic trees. So that knowing that that was going to encompass almost 2 entire episodes meant we were going to put a lot of resources into that. And then there's a few, there are very few sets where we're doing majority blue screen. I mean, as I think about it, some sets, like some of the elements of Coruscant, were initially conceived as being, half or three-quarters blue screen, and then as we kind of went down the road and iterated on the designs, we found ways to make the sets work in such a way that we could build more of it than we thought, possible initially, and use blue screen more as like deep background set extensions and stuff like that. And that just all like goes back to the aesthetic that we're after and trying to do as much of it as like real spaces and sort of more kind of handmade and classic looking.
Well, congratulations on the show. It was great. And thank you again for talking with me about it. I look forward to seeing episode 5 and how it all concludes.
Yeah, yeah. I look forward to you seeing it. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, when we got the first 4 episodes with how 4 ended, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
god damn it.
Now you gotta wait for weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got to experience that cliffhanger as well. But yeah, thank you. I hope the rest of your interviews go great, and I hope that you have a good week.